Stonehenge, the mystery of Britain's ancient monument, a mystery 5,000 years in the making. On a windswept plain in southern England stands one of the most mysterious monuments ever created. Enormous stones rise from the landscape. Some weigh more than 20 tons. Others were transported from mountains over 100 miles away. They were shaped, lifted, and carefully arranged by people who had no modern machinery, no cranes, and left behind no written explanation of what they were building. This is Stonehenge. For nearly 5,000 years, it has watched civilizations rise and fall around it, but its purpose remains a mystery. Was Stonehenge a temple, an astronomical calendar, a sacred burial ground, a destination for healing, or was it part of something much larger? An ancient ceremonial landscape connecting the worlds of the living and the dead. And perhaps the greatest question of all, how did prehistoric people move these enormous stones across Britain and raise them in the monument we see today? To understand Stonehenge, we must travel back thousands of years to a Britain almost completely different from the one we know today. Around 3000 BCE, the landscape of prehistoric Britain was changing. Farming communities had spread across the countryside. People raised cattle and sheep, cultivated crops, built settlements, and constructed enormous monuments to their dead. Across Britain, communities created burial mounds, ceremonial earthworks, and mysterious circular structures known as henges. Then, on Salisbury Plain, in what is now Wiltshire, people began building something extraordinary. But the first Stonehenge looked nothing like the monument we recognize today. Instead of towering stones, builders created a large circular ditch and bank measuring roughly 300 feet across. Inside this circle were dozens of pits, now known as the Aubrey Holes. Some contained cremated human remains. This discovery has led archaeologists to believe that Stonehenge may have served as an important burial ground during its earliest history, but this was only the beginning. Over the next 1,000 years, generation after generation would return to this same location, transforming it into one of the greatest monuments of prehistoric Europe. Several centuries later, something remarkable happened. Builders began bringing stones to Stonehenge, but these were not local stones. Known today as bluestones, many originated from Western Wales, particularly the Preseli Hills. That means some of these stones traveled well over 100 miles before reaching Salisbury Plain. Each could weigh several tons. How prehistoric communities transported them remains debated. Perhaps the stones were placed on wooden sledges and dragged across the land. Perhaps rollers were used. Rivers and coastal waterways may also have helped transport them part of the journey. Recent research has even suggested that some stones may have come from monuments that originally stood elsewhere before being moved to Stonehenge. Whatever happened, transporting these stones required extraordinary organization. Hundreds or perhaps thousands of people may have participated, and their willingness to move enormous stones across such great distances tells us something important. Stonehenge mattered deeply. These weren't simply building materials. The stones themselves may have carried meaning. Perhaps they represented distant communities, ancestors, sacred landscapes, or connections between different parts of prehistoric Britain. Then came the giants. Around 2500 BCE, enormous blocks of sandstone known as sarsens were transported to Stonehenge. Many likely came from Marlborough Downs, roughly 20 miles away. Some weighed more than 20 tons. The largest approached 40 tons. Moving them would have required immense effort. Teams may have dragged the stones across wooden tracks using ropes made from plant fibers or animal hide. Once a stone reached Stonehenge, builders faced an even greater challenge. They had to raise it. Archaeologists believe large pits were dug into the ground. One end of the stone was positioned over the pit. Then teams pulled on ropes while others used wooden supports and possibly earthen ramps to gradually lift the stone upright. But the engineering didn't stop there. Stonehenge's builders placed horizontal stones called lintels across the tops of the standing stones. Some were raised more than 15 feet above the ground, and astonishingly, the stones were joined together using woodworking techniques. Projections called tenons were carved into the upright stones. Matching holes called mortises were carved into the lintels. The pieces locked together like enormous stone furniture. Even the ends of the neighboring lintels were shaped to connect with each other. Stonehenge wasn't simply a collection of rocks. It was carefully engineered architecture. Imagine Stonehenge when it was newly completed. The stones were not covered in centuries of weathering. Their surfaces had been carefully shaped. The outer ring of massive sarsen stones formed an almost continuous circle. Inside stood 5 enormous arrangements called trilithons, 2 upright stones supporting a horizontal lintel. The tallest stood at the center. Bluestones were arranged among them. From a distance, the monument would have dominated the open landscape. But Stonehenge did not stand alone. Surrounding it was an enormous ceremonial landscape filled with burial mounds, earthworks, processional routes, and other monuments. Nearby stood Durrington Walls, one of the largest henge monuments in Britain. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of the houses there. Thousands of animal bones suggest enormous feasts took place. People may have traveled from across Britain to gather here. Stonehenge was not an isolated monument. It was part of the larger prehistoric world. One of Stonehenge's most extraordinary features becomes visible twice each year. Stand inside the monument during the summer solstice, and the rising sun aligns with the entrance and the heelstone. During the winter solstice, the setting sun aligns in the opposite direction. This was not an accident. Stonehenge's builders deliberately oriented the monument toward the movement of the sun. But why? For farming communities, understanding the seasons was essential. The movement of the sun determined when crops were planted and harvested, but the alignment may have carried a deeper spiritual meaning. The winter solstice marked the darkest point of the year. After that day, the sunlight slowly returned. For prehistoric communities, this may have symbolized renewal, death followed by rebirth, darkness followed by light. Interestingly, evidence suggests that enormous gatherings and feasts occurred near Stonehenge during the winter. This has led some archaeologists to believe that the winter solstice, rather than summer, may have been the monument's most important moment. Human remains provide another clue. Stonehenge contains one of the largest known cremation cemeteries from Neolithic Britain. Dozens of individuals were buried within or near the monument. Some archaeologists believe Stonehenge represented a realm associated with ancestors and the dead. Nearby Durrington Walls may have represented something different, the living. There, houses were built from wood, people gathered, animals were slaughtered, massive feasts took place. Stonehenge, by contrast, was built from stone, permanent, unchanging. Perhaps people traveled from the world of the living at Durrington Walls toward the world of the ancestors at Stonehenge. A ceremonial avenue connected Stonehenge with the River Avon. The river itself may have formed part of this symbolic journey. If so, Stonehenge wasn't simply somewhere people visited, it was the destination of a ritual procession. Another theory focuses on the bluestones. Some researchers have suggested these stones may have been believed to possess healing powers. Archaeologists have discovered human remains near Stonehenge showing serious injuries and illnesses. Some individuals came from distant regions. This raises an intriguing possibility. Perhaps people traveled to Stonehenge seeking healing. The bluestones from Wales may have carried spiritual significance long before they arrived on Salisbury Plain. If prehistoric people believe these stones possess special properties, transporting them hundreds of miles suddenly makes more sense. But without written records, we may never know. For centuries, Stonehenge was associated with the Druids. Images from later history often show robed Druids performing ceremonies among the stones. But archaeology tells a different story. Stonehenge was already ancient long before the Druids appeared in historical accounts. The monument was created by prehistoric farming communities living in Britain thousands of years before the Roman conquest. They weren't primitive. They possessed sophisticated knowledge of stoneworking, engineering, astronomy, landscape, and large-scale organization. Building Stonehenge would have required cooperation between enormous groups of people. Communities had to quarry stone, transport it, feed workers, make ropes and tools, plan the monument, and pass the knowledge from one generation to another. Stonehenge represents not the achievement of a single ruler, but perhaps the shared ambition of an entire society. Nearly 5,000 years after construction began, Stonehenge still stands. Some stones have fallen, others have disappeared. The people who built it vanished long ago, but the monument remains. We now understand more about Stonehenge than ever before. We know where many of its stones came from. We know roughly when different parts were constructed. We know people were buried here. We know enormous gatherings took place nearby. And we know its builders carefully aligned the monument with the sun. But the most important question remains unanswered. Why? Perhaps Stonehenge had never had a single purpose. It may have been a cemetery, a temple, a gathering place, a monument to ancestors, a symbol of unity, an astronomical marker, or all of these things at different moments during its 1,000-year evolution. Every archaeological discovery brings us a little closer to understanding the people who created it. But Stonehenge refuses to surrender all of its secrets, and perhaps that's why it continues to fascinate us. Standing alone beneath the vast sky of Salisbury Plain, its stones remind us that thousands of years before written history, people were already looking toward the heavens, building monuments, honoring their ancestors, and trying to understand their place in the universe. Thank you for joining us on another expedition through the ancient world. If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe to Ancient Atlas Expeditions as we explore lost cities, ancient wonders, mysterious monuments, and the civilizations that built them. Until next time, keep exploring.